Welcome to the Loan Officer Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Steve Kiles, and we are powered by the Mortgage Marketing Animals. And if you ever wanted to know how to move your clients and customers to the front of the line and effectively communicate with your agents, your partners, your past clients, then you are listening to the right episode, because I've got a great friend and fellow Freedom Club member, Tyler Osby. What's up, brother?
What's going on, man? Good to be here.
Hey, dude, I'm really excited. You and I were just in Orlando literally 2 weeks ago at the Freedom Club event. You're a Freedom Club member, been so for a number of years. And man, you presented and shared some of the things you're doing to win in communication and like in reviews, and how do you move clients to the front of the line and everything you're doing. I've even seen your autoresponders, you've sent them to me and I'm like, dude, this stuff is killer. So you're knocking it down, I mean, literally, I would call it stack it straight, knock it down as far as communication. And I know you hate to talk about numbers, but you're in Urbandale, Iowa, with Fairway Independent Mortgage. And this last year you did a cool, I don't know, $95 million in team volume in business. And I know the units are what you're proud about. So tell us the units. What was it, like 330? Right?
We did
like
430 last year.
430. Yeah. So the units matter. He got on to me. I'm like, units matter.
And I know, in Iowa, our average loan size is a little smaller than other parts of the country.
Well, I was thinking that, man. But I'll tell you this, it's so cool to have you on the podcast. You've been a friend now for, I don't know, a year and a half. We met about a year and a half ago and have become fast friends. So, hey, do this for somebody who's listening to the podcast. They don't know who you are. Tell them your story. How did you get in the business? And tell them a little bit about, your journey and man, what a remarkable year to do just under 100 million with 400 plus units. Like, you don't do that by accident. And so tell us your story, man.
Yeah. Well, so I got into the business 17 years ago when I was 20 years old. I really had no business doing this, like most people that get into the business, and just learned it. And I learned it the hard way. A lot of us aren't super lucky to come into an educational opportunity like the podcasts that are available today. Right. So my first few years were kind of like repeating the same terrible year over and over again. And it was brutal, and eventually I hit a point where I had to make a decision, am I going to make this work? Because it was really painful not knowing where the next loan was coming from. And made some decisions to make some investments in myself with different events that I was going to, and finding a better suited company that kind of, gave me an opportunity to grow and build something. And when I made that transition, that was about, 13 years ago. I interviewed over 30 companies, no joke, because I'm a real high fact finder. And I settled on 2 companies, actually. One of them was Fairway. And at the time, Fairway said no. I was 24. It was a little risky to give a 24-year-old a P&L at the time. So I went and met with this other company. And then when I went, I just realized that it just didn't jive with where I was at. So I made some calls and thank goodness back channeled my way into Fairway. I got somebody to vouch for me. It was actually Dave Savage. So credit to Dave Savage for that contact. But been at Fairway ever since and absolutely love it. And it's a great place to build a business. A lot of really cool people at Fairway. And it's been a lot of fun.
Hey, and talk about your journey. So 17 years in the business. Mm-hmm. And dude, I totally relate. It's like you keep having this leap year. It's like, okay, we'll do that again. And we'll do that again. So what is it, do you think, how long have you been a part of the Freedom Club? So you're part
I've been in the Freedom Club for, I think, 6 years now, I think.
Okay, cool.
It's been a while. Yeah.
Well, and tell me about that journey as well, because would you say this last year was your best year ever?
Financially, the year before that was a little better, but also, we just rolled in refis, right? So we transitioned into really heavy focus on purchase business, trying to make that pivot back last year. And it worked really well. And, momentum this year is paying off for the same reasons. But, a little bit into the journey, right? So I started calling myself a team a long time ago, like probably 10, 10 to 12 years ago. And I think a lot of that was driven by ego, because I just thought like that was what the cool people did, right? They had a team and it was their name, team. And, ran with that. I literally didn't have another employee that worked with me when I started calling myself the team. And then, made my first hire, did a lot of things wrong. Literally first day, and this is a true story, and Andrew is still with me on my team today, but first hire, first day, he shows up and I had no idea what to have him do. So I slid him my car keys and I said, I don't know, just like wash the car or something. I had no idea, which like the more and more I talk to people, the more and more I realize that's how clueless a lot of us are when we make our first hire, right? So anyway, long time has passed since then. A lot of things have gotten a whole lot better. But one of the main reasons I joined the Freedom Club was because I knew that there were people who already were successfully operating a team model. So, I'm a big fan of modeling, not in the sense of like, posing for magazines, but mimicking what works, right? And in, talking to a lot of people at a 2-day event that I went to, or maybe it was a 3-day back then, I met a lot of really interesting cats and was already very ready to make the investment because I had done coaching and that kind of thing for years before that. So it just, it was really glad to write the check, couldn't write the check fast enough, honestly. And then just got to meet some really cool people and get a better idea of who should be doing what. And, everything from titles, right, to who does what, to how the money works, to all the things. It's been a huge game changer to just see people who are already successfully operating. And then now through the years, we've figured some things out and been fortunate enough to kind of return the favor and teach some stuff to the group.
Man, I love it. Hey, and isn't it interesting that when we got in the business, there's really no roadmap, man. There's nobody who says, okay, let's do your degree in mortgage banking and becoming a successful loan officer team that closes $100 million a year. You really have to kind of bump your way into it and mastermind with other people. I love that. Hey, and Tyler, one of the things I'm so impressed with is your communication. As we've got people listening to the podcast, you're saying, hey, I want to grow a team. It may be me, but I have a vision to add another person, or it may be you and a back-end loan partner. And you're saying, hey, I want to add a pre-approval specialist or a mortgage expert or a loan partner, whatever you call it, somebody on the front end. One of the biggest challenges that I've seen, and even last year experienced a little bit of it, is how do you get out of the middle of all of the communication? Like all roads go to Tyler, all roads go to Steve. So as you're growing your team, what are some of the things you've done so that you can really work out the communication? And like we talked about in the topic title, which is kind of pull your people to the front of the line. So talk about some of that communicating when you have a team.
Yeah. Well, so I think the one thing that we struggle with as originators is we want to be the source of all information for clients, referral sources, whatever. And that's how we build it, So everybody's got our cell phone number, everybody's got our direct email. And we teach them to just reach out. Like, it's no big deal. Just reach out. Call me, text me, whatever. I'm here 24/7, 365. I got you. And you build it that way, right? And the biggest issue is eventually you're going to hit a point where you're either too busy to respond quickly, or like you just need a break, right? Like burnout is a real issue. It just is. And we all kind of were fortunate enough to see that over the last couple of years as volume's been outrageous. So I think the big struggle is we set it up so it's all one funnel that comes straight to us. That's the big issue. And then secondly, we get it in our head. We kind of, a phrase that I love is the story I'm telling myself is, and then whatever the statement is, right? It's oftentimes like a self-limiting belief. But the story I was telling myself was no one else is going to respond to these people as quickly as I will, right? So you make sure that you're the first point of contact so you can deliver on the service promises you've made. And what I learned was that's not at all the truth. Like, there's so many super talented people that are looking for a gig that they can plug in right to what you're doing, right? And they can stay in their lane and do their thing and support you. And, they'll do all the things at the same cadence, oftentimes faster, because you're probably busy in a consult or at a lunch with an agent or something, right? And they'll keep the ball moving while you're doing other things, even if the other things are like just doing whatever it is that you want to do that afternoon that isn't work. I mean, it's important that you have a non-bottlenecked form of communication. So when I realized that, that's when everything turned. And I'll let you kind of lead the conversation.
No, I mean, let's talk about that. It is interesting. I think one of the, as we're growing as loan officers, and this is a me too, you're 100% right. It's like, hey, I'm available 24/7, 7 days a week, call or text. Here's what I would always say. Hey, call or text anytime. And that anytime is all the time. And then you got to get to a point where it's like, we know, our friend Alex over at Sales Boomerang talks about 79% of mortgage customers use the first loan officer they speak with. Well, if you're not answering your phone, and here's the crazy thing, Tyler, I called a loan officer earlier today, and guess where it went? Voicemail. And I thought, oh my gosh, it truly went to voicemail. No, it wasn't full, but it went to voicemail. And I almost texted him and said, man, if I was a client, you just lost me. But I let it sit. And, Tyler, I think, so here's what happens. I'm listening to somebody who's listening to podcasts say, okay, Steve, I'm that guy. I'm that girl. I'm doing everything I can. I'm making my calls. Now all roads lead to me. What do I do? How do I get out of the day-to-day call? Because Tyler, the way I did it last year was not good. I did it like Tammy was coaching me last year in April, and she said, get out of your business, like get out of every little aspect of it, and then, chunk it. And by June 10th, I ported my cell phone number. Actually, it was June 8th. I remember it was the day Carl and I were doing an event in Houston. And I literally just went from everything to my cell to everything into a ported number that went to Elevate and then Zip Whip. And Tyler, we broke so many things. I mean, it was awful for 2 weeks. It was a mess. And it was like, could I do it different? Would I have done it different? Yes. But I'm so glad that I did it. And so I bet you've got a better way than the way I did it. All I knew how to do was turn it on, turn it off. And so how would you tell somebody all roads lead to them? How do they get out of that rat race? How do they get some help? How do they keep, communication? Talk to us about that.
Well, so it's a really interesting question, right? Because sometimes you are just a lone ranger, right? Like there's people who will listen to this that they're thinking, dude, who else is going to answer my phone if it ain't me? And that's perfectly fine, actually. So whether you're a person who is closing like a loan a month or you're closing 100 loans a month, right? And we know people who are in both categories, both super cool people and both totally deserving of having a killer life, right? So this is something that they can do right away. And it doesn't matter if they've got somebody else who's going to answer the phone. You have to centralize communication and act as if you have a team. Like before you do, right? Because the earlier you have the technology in place and the systems in place, the faster you're going to be able to grow because you've already got a communication system built for doing 100 loans a month. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just make the pivot, right? Like it's never going to be too early to make the pivot. Now, anybody who doesn't know Steve, his speed of implementation is probably like the best of anyone I know. Yeah. So it's not surprising that was the outcome. And you know what, dude, stuff's going to break. Like I think that anybody who can get their arms wrapped around the idea that this is never going to be perfect, done is better than nothing. Right. I think you got to be willing to accept that you're going to have some speed bumps with anything that you implement, right? That being said, there's a couple ways that you can go about doing this, and I'll share what I've seen people do. So you've got two options with phone numbers, right? And that's our first point of contact, which affects both people picking up the phone and calling you and typing text messages, right? So option one is you can port over your cell phone number, and you can port it over to any service provider. There's a number of them out there. I don't have a favorite. And I know, Freedom Club, one of the things I love about Freedom Club is there's no rev share with anything. So you guys are totally open as well. It's not like you got to go with this provider. But like, for example, my first who from a tech stack perspective was Ring Central. And Ring Central, you can use both for texting and phone. I don't particularly love it for both, but it is a suitable who that you can centralize with multiple users. So if you port it over to Ring Central, what'll happen immediately once that porting has happened is all of your phone numbers will be routed through the Ring Central system. So if someone calls, they'll hit whatever you set Ring Central to do. So if it's just ringing one phone, that's what it'll do. If it rings like an auto attendant that says, hey, you've reached the offices of Steve Kiles, press 1 if you're a new lead, 2 if you're whatever. You can do all that as well, right? And then also when a text comes in, it's going to come in through that Ring Central app, and you'll be able to reply right within the Ring Central app. Now, a couple words of caution. If you port over your cell phone number, everybody that ever has called you or tried to call you on your cell phone number will now be calling your office, which depending on your friends circle and family members and stuff, that may or may not be a great idea. I don't know. But sometimes an inappropriate picture gets sent somewhere, and that can create some uncomfortable conversations if you already have employees. So just throwing that out there, because I've seen that happen.
You just got to be aware that everything that was on your cell phone now goes to the office line, which is, hey, that's actually a funny thing to think about. But yeah, it really does. When I did it, I just figured, you know what? Somebody on the team will say, hey, call Steve, your buddy so-and-so called. So yeah, that's a funny way to think of it. And I like Ring Central. Ring Central's one we use too. It's a great tech. It's a great, and there's others out there like Grasshopper, and I've heard of several others, but yeah, Ring Central's great. So you port it over. Hey, okay. So keep going. Number one, port it.
And then the beauty of porting a number is you don't have to tell anybody you did anything. Like it just happens and the phones start going to the right place. So if you want the fastest way to do it, that's it. Okay. Some people have reservations about, well, I don't want the, messages to go there or whatever. That's up to you. Option 2 will require more work. Option 2 is you get a new phone number, which you can get through Ring Central. And then you start telling people, this is my new phone number. And there is an educational process that typically takes 3 to 6 months of getting everyone to become aware that now have a completely different office line. And, some people will, go along very easy with it. Other people will put up a little bit of a fight. And I think that's just a good opportunity for you to exercise your new capability of enforcing boundaries as a business owner. Because there's some agents that'll say, well, I like to text you. And for me, because this is obviously a frequently asked question we get in the Freedom Club, when I get that question, I say, listen, I love you, and I'm going to continue to hang out with you. We're going to do our coffees, our lunches. We're going to go, I don't know if you golf or whatever your thing is. We're still going to do that. But when it comes to getting business done, my priority is to move you and all of your people to the front of the line. Everybody in my office gets a fast pass. It's probably trademark, so you can't really use that, but that's the truth. Everybody gets to the front of the line. And what that means is you don't wait on me. So if I'm in a consult or I'm at my daughter's recital or whatever it is that I'm doing that day, nobody's going to know because they're going to be moved to the front of the line. And one of my teammates who's very friendly, capable, and, they're able to assist, they'll step in and they'll make sure that you or that client are fully taken care of. But I was starting to notice that I was bottlenecking a little bit. I mean, you got to take ownership, right, of why you made the change. So for me, I began to notice that I was bottlenecking and not able to get back to people as quickly as I wanted to. And I'm not okay with that. So for me, the solution was we need to centralize this communication thing. I've got a lot of really talented people on my team that can help out. So I want to make it easy. So when you reach out, there's one of many people that are actually able to respond to that inquiry.
I love that. Hey, and you said a couple of things that I want to just talk about real quick, because I love how you're validating your team. Tyler, when I was new in the business, it was easy to be like, hey, well, if you want the real answer, come to me because I know it all. And what I realized it was doing was it created a lack of confidence in our team members. Like, I trusted them. I thought they were fantastic, but the way I was communicating it to the outside was that, hey, don't really trust my team members. If you need the right answer, come to me because I got them all. And what we've really learned over the last probably 2 to 3 years, maybe even 4, is that the more I can lean into them and the more, hey, listen, that's a great question. I know Marty on my team's actually going to be able to get that for you. She's the expert in anything contract to close. So let me do this. Let me get her on the phone and have her give you a call back. Right.
Yeah.
But validating the strength of our team members does nothing but help us and really helps the referral partners trust that you have the insight to hire the right people who can take care of them.
Yep. Well, in the story I told in the Freedom Club, when I presented in Orlando, was I had really kind of grown up in a business where I wanted to be, the most important person. Like I was told by a guy back when I was 16, 17, like, you're replaceable. And that bothered me. So I kind of like built this business that made me irreplaceable, right? Which sucks because as it turns out, I didn't want to have a job. I actually wanted to have a business, Steve. Like, I don't think enough people make that pivot where they start to think, okay, am I a job owner or a business owner? Right.
Dude, that's a big, hold on. For everybody listening, do I have a job or am I a business owner? And I tell you, that's a huge pivot though, Tyler. It just goes back to, I think that's the fundamental thought around what you're talking about. So go ahead. Dude, that's huge. That's a big aha.
Yeah. And I think as soon as people are willing to kind of like acknowledge that, even though it's a little bit of a hit to your ego, because you begin to realize like what I do isn't all that difficult. There's a lot of other really talented people who can do this mortgage thing, other than me. It's a pretty easy pivot. So anyway, we talked about the porting over the phone number or starting up a new phone number, making sure that your inbox for phone calls and texts is not bottlenecked, I think is step 1. Step 2 is you need to set up reactive responses that lead people down the path you want them to go. So Steve was kind of mentioning the example of how we have an out of office reply, right? And it's on 100% of the time in my inbox because I want, if someone reaches out to me directly, so like my email is a direct email address. When someone emails me, it automatically kicks back a response, and the response, and I don't know if we have show notes or something we can post this in, Steve, or like a strategy call if someone can get a copy of it. But it just says I'm currently in consultations throughout the day. While I'm in those consultations, I like to give them 100% of my attention. So I won't see your email until probably at the earliest tomorrow morning. However, I don't want you to wait to get a response. So here's what to do. And then it says, find your original email, because people forward an out of office all the time. Find your original email and forward it to the team at this email address. And you'll move to the front of the line and someone will get back to you more quickly. Or if you're a new client looking to get pre-approved, go to this website and get the application process started for free. And then the team will be in contact to schedule a consult. Or if you need a pre-approval letter, because we do unique pre-approval process, here's the instructions on how to follow through with that. But it's really giving them like really clear, if this, then that type instructions. And that's on 24/7. So what happens pretty quickly, thank goodness, is people learn and they will modify their behavior. So that way they're only going to be, emailing the team instead of me directly. So that was kind of the big aha for me, is making sure people are learning like, okay, Tyler is a bottleneck, right? Because when I was on the phone with Tyler, I did notice, like I didn't get interrupted at all, so I knew that he was in fact paying attention to my phone call. So that's a little bit more into why we do that.
I love it. Well, in that reactive responses is fantastic because it can be from an autoresponder via email. One of our good friends, Scotty Campbell, actually has a fantastic one. When you text him, he has an automatic text, or when you call him, I'm sorry, and he doesn't answer, you get an automatic text that's sent right to you. It's a reactive response. You could do voicemails that there's clear direction on how to work with your team. Hey, I've got a couple questions real quick.
Yeah.
So if you use something like Ring Central, and that's where you're centralizing your communication, how do you handle text? What tech stack, or what are you using for text? Are you using the Ring Central, or like we use ZipWhip, but they no longer are doing the
New
text
clients
anymore? Yeah. So we're an old client that's kind of grandfathered in, but what
till
are you
the end of the
using?
year.
Yeah. Well, so what would you recommend? What's the next solution to that?
So I did a bunch of research on this. And again, there's no rev share or anything. This is just my own personal research, but Haymarket seems to be the best option for texting.
Tell me the HAY, spell it.
Heymarket. And I think
Got
it's
it.
an explanation.
Oh, it's like, hey, okay.
Yep.
Got it.
So there's a lot of functionality with Haymarket, but really quickly, I'll kind of spell out what I think makes a successful texting app. And I also use ZipWhip, Steve. So that's why I'm familiar with all their quirks. But and ZipWhip's fantastic. They just got bought for the IP by Twilio. So Twilio is shutting them down because they don't want to back another software service. So the reason I like ZipWhip is when someone responds on my team, it tells me who it was that responded. So there's some accountability there. And we're all looking at the same text messages. It's the same inbox. It's just like one huge shared inbox where there's accountability of who's saying what. You can also send what would be the equivalent of like a mail merge text message to a large group of people, which we find really effective around like events and that kind of thing, right? And then Haymarket also has capabilities where you can add people to campaigns and have like, scheduled text messages going out. You can use Zapier, which is like a third-party service that'll have one software tell another piece of software to do something, and it can automate text messages, stop automations on text messages. If you're a total nerd like I am with automation and stuff, it's really handy. Haymarket's going to be a really big pickup for us.
I love it.
They're really affordable. Like it's cheaper than ZipWhip was, which
Dude, that's
is
great.
irritating.
Well, and I need something to replace ZipWhip, so it'll be great. Hey, and by the way, if you're listening and you say, hey, I want to know more about what Tyler's doing, I know Tyler shared a lot of this with the Freedom Club. Go to freedomplanningcall.com, book a strategy call. We'll be happy to have one of our team members kind of walk you through what Tyler's doing, what he shared at the Freedom Club. freedomplanningcall.com. It's a great place to get a strategy call, maybe get some of these tools that Tyler's talking about. And hey, I want to talk about two more things, and then our time's coming to a close. What happened when the agents, did you have agents push back? Oh, I only want to talk to Tyler. He's the only one I want. Tyler or nothing. What did you do with that?
So you got two different outcomes. Sometimes you have people who just need to kind of be led, right? And you explain, hey, you know what? Like, I really appreciate our relationship. I think it's always important to reinforce that, you still have that strong relationship with the agent partner. However, in order to continue to serve you at the capacity that we have, because, I value speed to respond and accurate responses, is we have now centralized all of our inboxing. So everybody is getting responded to quickly. Right. And this is the new process of how we're going to do that. So we can deliver the same experience that you've come to expect as I continue to, kind of build out an even better experience behind the scenes. Right. And most times that's really been well received. From time to time, you'll have agents who just aren't really digging it, for whatever reason, they're not into it and they just don't want to follow the clear path you're giving them. And you know what? Sometimes they get it, sometimes they don't. So what? I used to kind of dismiss it and be kind of not kind about my assessment of the situation. And not to say that stuff wasn't accurate, but for me, it's just better to know that there's going to be so many more agents who appreciate the way we go about doing things that there aren't going to be any hurt feelings because I've decided to like actually start treating this thing like a business and not a hobby. You know what I mean?
That's huge. Well, and Tyler, it goes back to what we talk about. We talked about it at the Freedom Club. Do we want to get bitter or better? And the reason why that's so important is when you learn to have centralized communication, you're not bitter because the calls are running and wrecking your life. And listen, we're not that, I don't mean that in a negative way. The calls are the lifeblood of our business. But then there comes a point where it's almost like you can be at dinner with your kids. And instead of investing in these few short years we have with kids, you're getting inundated with all these calls or needs for pre-approval letters. And whether that's a soccer game, a night or weekend. And, even one of the things we've been using effectively is Voice Nation. So Voice Nation, we really, we have somebody who answers the call the first time the same way. We call it sweat, same way every time. So listen, every call is answered the same way every time in our branch and in my personal production team. And one of the things is if some crazy reason it's about to ring into voicemail because it wasn't picked up, which is rare, you can even hire somebody like Voice Nation, which is a call answering service. And it's kind of a last resort, but it's a great way to ensure that the phones are answered, and then tell them you want to use some of our scripts. I know my scripts are in there. So are, the ones we use at the Marketing Animals, but there's so many great resources. And I just love what you're talking about, man. The centralizing communication so that we can pull our customers to the front of the line. And one of the things, Tyler, I was thinking about, we have to share the why. Why is it important we're doing what we're doing to better serve the clients? And if we share the why, we can get them to buy in. But I found some of my agents wouldn't come along with me on the journey, and it was okay. We just started replacing them and getting other agents that were okay with working with the team. And
I've done this long enough that I've had agents that were resistant, right? And they tried someone else, right? Because they wanted to feel like they had this one-on-one closer relationship or something. I don't know. And we've had situations where that didn't go so well because they were winging it. They didn't have systems and processes in place. So as it turned out, like not only they like me, right, but they also really like the business that, we've been kind of testing and building together over the years. So they decide, what, like I actually do think I want to participate in that. And I've even had agents come further along in that journey and say, I've seen what you've done and I kind of would like to do it myself. Can you tell me a little bit more about how you did that? And that's where it gets fun, right? You get to show people, hey, there's a life outside of this chaotic, Pop-Tart agent type culture where you're always having to answer the phone and not have any boundaries and not be able to attend your kids' activities and be present. It's pretty cool to be able to see people come full circle that way. Now, will they all? No, there's always the person who keeps jumping into abusive relationships and doesn't learn to set better boundaries, unfortunately. But we're just trying to lead them and show them how it can be done.
Yeah.
And hopefully they did make the decision to come with us.
I love it, man. Hey, well, Tyler, thank you for being a part of our community. Thank you for being a part of the Loan Officer Leadership Podcast today, sharing your insight about how to bring your customers to the front of the line. Man, I think it's invaluable. And I think if we can learn how to have good, clear, consistent communication, it will help all of us, including our partners. So thank you for being here.
Well, Steve, before you wrap, I want to thank you because being in the Freedom Club for the last 6 years, there's so much talent, right? I mean, you've seen it, and so many friends. The one thing that I always wanted to have so I could get myself further out of the business was a system and process about how we sell, right? Like a selling process. And we have been so fortunate as listeners of this podcast. I've been long time listener, like well before you and Carl got connected. And just the clarity and scripting, but also process has been a complete game changer, even down to just like the confidence that we have as a team going into conversations. And I'm just feeling a lot less resentful. And I genuinely want to thank you for that on this platform. I know I've talked to you about that personally. But I mean, it's made a big difference, dude. Like it just, not just my business, but also just my own state of mental health with, gaining commitment earlier on in the process. So I just want to thank and encourage you with all the work you're doing, because I know you're doing it in your own branch. That's why I know you're making so much progress, because you're making huge changes in your own branch. And we've just got like a just straight contact, straight to what's going on. So I just really appreciate you sharing.
Well, man, I appreciate you, brother. Thank you for the kind words. And, from the day I met you, I've always loved our time together. And dude, I respect you a ton. You're doing phenomenal building your group and your contribution. That's what I love. If somebody were to say, why am I part of the Mortgage Marketing Animals Freedom Club? For this? Because if we weren't on a podcast, guess what, Tyler? We'd be talking about it anyway, hanging out. What are you doing? Matter of fact, this is who I reached out to whenever I started getting out of my systems. I'm like, all right, man, I need some help. Send me what you got. Let's look at it. And really, it has been just a huge help. So if you're listening today, thank you for being a part of the Loan Officer Leadership Podcast. Hey, and I do want to do this. If keep giving us reviews. I appreciate the reviews. I'm reading one right now that literally just came in a couple days ago. And man, these reviews help us. They help us to where people find the podcast, they see the reviews, share with 2 other loan officers could benefit from the content, and then also subscribe. When you do that, every week when the episodes come out, we do one on Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. This is the one Tyler will be coming out on. And then also we do a script and a strategy. It's strategy, structure, and scripting on Saturdays. And that's really what's been fun. Tyler, you alluded to it. But as we're building this branch, it's been phenomenal growth. What we're doing is everything we're running into, and how do I script my very first call, and what does my receptionist say? What does the pre-approval specialist do, and the mortgage expert? And then, like I just did an episode 2 episodes back about how your loan partner can chase conditions more effectively and really get the client to buy in to giving them the documents in a timely manner. Why did we do it, Tyler? Because it's what we're running into, bro. Yeah. And so I just figure, as we're doing it, we're going to keep sharing it. Thank you for being on the journey. We're honored to be here. Come on, go ahead, Tyler. One more thing.
The thing I have to say, because it blows my mind, like if you listen to these podcasts, the amount of material and quality of content you're getting, and you're not even paying them anything.
Come on, you're not even paying me nothing.
Imagine how good it is when you start actually writing checks. Like if you haven't done the strategy call, like I just think you're crazy not to, because the people on the other side of that call are people who are talking to some of these people are doing 100 units a month, routinely. So like they know what it takes to take you from wherever you're at to where you're wanting to go. In that strategy session's free, right?
100%
charging for that. So yeah, it's nuts. Like they have moved the free line so much in the mortgage community. It's absolutely insane. So if you haven't done that, just do it.
freedomplanningcall.com, book a strategy call. We'd love to have our team help you build your next 90, 120 days. So Tyler, thank you, brother. You are a true brother. I appreciate all you do to contribute and add value. Honored to call you friend. Let's keep changing the world together. And we'll see you next time on the Loan Officer Leadership Podcast. Remember this, anything we're doing is worth doing badly. Just get started. See you.
Thanks, Steve.